dramatic scene on the floor of the Green Chamber following fierce disagreements over the electronic transmission clause in the Electoral Act Amendment Bill.
Okay, what do you want to amend? Okay, sit and amend. Go and amend. Go and amend. Go and amend.
Well, tempers flared, voices rose, and what should have been a technical legislative adjustment quickly spiraled into a political confrontation over transparency, trust, and the future of Nigeria's elections. At the heart of the storm, whether real-time electronic transmission of results should be mandatory or subject to a caveat allowing manual collation through Form EC8A in the event of network failure.
And while opposition lawmakers were outside briefing the press and rejecting the process, events moved swiftly inside the chamber. A majority of members, including some from opposition ranks, proceeded to pass the bill in line with the Senate's position. The amendment effectively removes the mandatory nature of real-time electronic transmission, retaining the proviso that allows manual transmission where connectivity fails.
We want to see those who are saying if the transmission or communication fails, that the election stops there. That's what they're saying. That's what they're saying.
Well, across the Senate, it was no less dramatic. There were points of order, a call for division, heated exchanges across party lines. When the vote was finally taken, the majority upheld the caveat. The 2026 Electoral Act Amendment Bill was passed with the provision that if electronic transmission fails, Form EC8A remains valid for collation. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunrise. It is this morning. I'm Chamberlain Oso.
Good morning. That's the drama we're looking at this morning. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf.
I'm sure little did people expect this was going to be the case, especially after we had Senator Carlos say, well, yes, they were going to come up with something yesterday, assuming all goes well. Lo and behold, who would have seen this coming? But clearly, it does appear as though they might have met behind the scenes because both houses followed a similar script, passing the Electoral Act with the proviso, Form EC8A. In fact, there was that protest which was also going on outside the National Assembly. So that notwithstanding, they went in, and that was the result of what the people got. So a big question now, has the rubber hit the road? Is it history now? Should the people let this slide? Who knows? Well, that is what we're going to be focusing on today on the program and more. So don't go away because we will be right back. Welcome back. So joining us this morning to discuss the controversy is Honorable Afam Ogene, who is a leader, Labour Party caucus and member representing Ogbaru Federal Constituency in Anambra State. Good morning and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Chamberlain, and good morning, Marpen.
Good morning, Honorable. It's one of the very rare occasions where we get to host you on Sunrise Daily. This must really be very important for you.
Yeah.
For Nigeria.
For
our country.
I'll tell you.
Indeed.
And trust you were there on the floor. This was not what a lot of people expected. Were the members, I mean, maybe the opposition members, were they surprised or did you see the handwriting on the wall before now?
No, we are never surprised. You know, external vigilance is the price of liberty. So we are always vigilant when issues like this are to come up. And remember that the process started with the formalities of beginning the sitting. And then in between, there was need for an executive session. And we went into that executive session, during which the Speaker explained the reason for the special session, because we are actually on break from plenary and looking into the budget issues. And so we said we needed to have copies of the Electoral Act amendments, clean copies to look at, and he promised that that will be given to us and we'll have 15 to 20 minutes to look at it. But the first sign of trouble was that as soon as we devolved into executive session, no copy was given to us. And then the Deputy Speaker, who chairs all consideration of all reports, proceeded to consider the reports in a manner that we considered not judicial to good conscience.
Do you think it was scripted, deliberate?
No, if we are going to read an important national document as a repeal and reenactment of the Electoral Act, it's not just mere amendment, then we should look at all the clauses. But it proceeded from clause 1 to 10. So how do I know if something in between in clause 5 does not sit well with my conscience?
So normally, what you're saying is that each clause, you will mention the clause, read out the content of that clause, response on floor, whether you agree or not, before you go to the next clause.
Procedure. So
okay, but he said he was reading clause 1 to 10.
In 3 minutes, we are at clause 60.
Oh, okay, that's what happened with clause 60.
Yes. In 3 minutes, we are clause 60.
And we could see the lawmakers protesting. I think that, so that was captured. It didn't happen in the executive session because the cameras were there. And they could capture the protest of lawmakers. What's going on? Distinguished, you have to, read it clause by clause. So we heard that protest clause by clause, clause by clause. And it would seem, I don't know how that was resolved, but it would seem that lawmakers, that was not really where their attention was. It was when he now entered clause 60, then they said, no, clause 60, clause 60. That was now the protest in that particular area. So how was the matter eventually resolved when these issues about the fact that you didn't have the laws before you, what was being amended, the copies, the clean copies that are supposed to be amended were supposed to be before you, they were not given to you, and then they were not even read out. They were just taken wholesale by just their numbers. How was that eventually resolved?
Well, the chant for clause 60 that you heard and Nigerians heard was the fact that at clause 60 sub 3, we thought that we should make an important amendment. And they didn't want to allow us do that. But eventually, because of that chant, we were allowed to take the amendments. About 2 or 3 members took amendments, which failed, of course, because the APC had the majority voice. But then, what we wanted to push through is something that is very important to the whole process of the electoral amendment bill. Why do I say so? The Senate version added a proviso that where real-time transmission of election results fail, then the manual from EC8A should be depended upon. But we wanted also to say that we are successfully transmitted, the transmitted results should also have the same effect in law as the physical copy. Because the lacuna is, they will now go and use those physical copies to perpetrate whatever shenanigans anybody wants to perpetrate in terms of compromising the process. So we thought that a win-win situation would be that the transmitted copies that had gone should have the force of law, same as is being accorded the physical from ECHA, but they wouldn't allow that.
Because as it is now, even the IREV itself, you can't even rely on that. That's the consequence of this, isn't it? As having the force of law.
Yes, you can't. But the fact is that the word electronically transmitted has gotten into the amendment. It has gotten into the amendment. But it is that lacuna of adding that proviso, from the Senate side that we are against, and saying that even if it were to stand, then let's open the hallway to justice.
Yesterday, just a moment, we had Senator Ojo Zokalu here, and he is a member. I do not know if that committee is still standing, though. The Harmonization Committee.
It's gone.
Between the House and the Senate.
It's gone.
You mean the Harmonization Committee is gone?
It's gone. Since they were repealed,
yes, indeed. So
they weren't even allowed to function.
Exactly. So that's what I was curious about, because he told us that, by this afternoon we should have a very clear document of what the harmonization, because I would imagine that was the work that these people were meant to do. Bring whatever has been harmonized by the House and the Senate to the chambers for them to simply pass. This proviso which you speak of, was it ever sent to the Harmonization Committee?
Well, as far as I know, the Harmonization Committee didn't come up with any report. We have some members in that committee, and they were to push through this clause, this amendment that we tried to push on the floor. They were to take it to the Harmonization Committee. But again, the process is such that when it comes to conference committee to harmonize, by law, you're not supposed to add or subtract. When you get to a particular clause, it is either you take the Senate version or you take the version of the House. But what we saw was a tinkered report, different from the Electoral Act passed by the House of Representatives and different from what the Senate passed.
So it was amended?
It was amended outside of plenary.
That is very strange. What exactly was added to it? What was the amendment that was added? Because you said it's different from what the Senate passed. It's also different from what the House passed.
Okay, let me point you to section 84(3). I have a copy, by the way.
Which one? The amended version?
So only have
2022.
If you simply look at 84, Clause 84(2) says, the procedure for the nomination of candidates by political parties for the various elective positions shall be by direct, indirect primaries, or consensus. 3 modes. What did we get on the floor? They gave us this paper while the consideration was already on. And what did this say? 84(2). The procedure for the nomination of candidates by political parties for the various elective positions shall be by direct primaries or consensus. So indirect was gone.
Wait. So you mean they already took that out before they gave it to all the members on the floor?
In the clean copy that we are to consider, the 3 modes are here.
Are there. But
and now they brought this appendage. And obviously, this is what was read and passed.
So it shall only
denying political parties the right to choose the mode of their primaries, limiting them to direct
and consensus.
Is this not
as against what we passed and what the Senate passed?
It's not legislative brigandage. I mean, this is not the procedure in the House, is it?
Well, call it whatever name. The jury should be Nigerians. We are minority, and so they have claimed the majority. But ultimately, we work for the Nigerian people. So the matter is out there for the Nigerian people to dissect.
Yesterday, we saw the minority walk out of the proceedings when they were not getting their way. We've seen in times past that form of protest usually is not a very effective form of protest because, I mean, from what we saw, not all members of the opposition got up. So they appointed another minority leader there, and they went ahead and they passed what they had to pass. How effective would you say that the form of protest you choose, is in terms of getting the voice of the... Because I would imagine that also within the APC, there are those who also share your sentiments. But the fact that you decide to walk out, removes the wind from their sail.
No, on the contrary. Yes, some people have said a walkout is not a very good democratic practice. But you also ask yourself, we are close to primary session, and no member of the APC would want to be caught on camera going against his or her party's position. You saw that they were all hooded in one part of the chambers, even standing largely, And so there was no way they were going to support these very democratic moves, even though some of them, their hearts of hearts, stand with us. So there was nothing we could do seated there. We don't want to be part of what might constitute an illegality. And so we decided to register our protest before the Nigerian people, to let them know that the APC has stolen the village drum. We'll wait for them to beat it come 2027.
Why do you say that they've stolen? Because, I mean, normally people know that at the end of the day, what I first of all find interesting is that the House, it would seem, already stood apart when it passed the Electoral Act. The version it passed, a lot of people saluted the effort of the House of Representatives because its own was pretty straightforward. There was no proviso. It made provisions for e-transmission. What do you think has transpired that has now made, it will seem, members of the House now toe the line of the Senate?
Well, it's party politics. You said it. The country applauded the House of Representatives for the futuristic stance it took in terms of transmission. And then between the few days of harmonization, party politics came into play and sought to water down the very far-reaching decision that the House of Representatives had progressively taken.
So they just basically whipped their party members in line and said, this is what the party wants. What the party wants is what you would do, which appears clearly that was what was done in both chambers.
It happened in open chambers, and we saw that the vote was along party lines.
So this comes across as though they are just telling the people, we are in the majority. We're confident that we will go out there and get what we want. And that raises questions for opposition. Are they going to see this as a tool to galvanize themselves and ensure that, look, Nigerians clearly want something done, which the opposition is not doing at the moment? Are we going to see opposition tomorrow equally just capitulate, as we've seen several governors have now moved to the APC?
Well, what the APC had done to the psyche of Nigerians is not something I will begin to recount here. If you recall, talking about elections and the fidelity to due process in elections, the late Musa Yar'Adua, former president of this country, is mostly revered for just one sentence, that the elections that brought him into power was flawed. And so he was going to do something towards making our elections more transparent. And then he set up the late Justice Uwe's commission to look into that. Now, have you ever heard this government say anything about the glitch of 2023? So it remains a sore thumb. When you bury a corpse solely, a hand or leg will stick out. So that glitch is sticking out.
It's sticking out, but and I'm wondering, because when you talk about government, yes, the executive arm of government hasn't said anything, and I think whenever it is that people get the opportunity, questions need to be asked of the president, the vice president, and other members of the executive arm of government. But members of the legislature cannot also escape that question as well as to what they've done to hold INEC accountable. What exactly was the glitch? Because we heard this over and over again, and it doesn't seem that we have been able to get any real level of accountability from INEC, either from the oversight that the National Assembly is supposed to do, or maybe some investigation by the executive arm of government.
Well, it's not as if we've been sleeping on our earth. I was introduced as leader of the Labour Party caucus. And I know that early in the day, in 2023, few weeks and months after we came in, we decided that that issue of glitch had to be looked into. And so one of our members, Honorable Benedict Etanabene from Delta State, was mandated by the caucus to move an investigation of INEC and the glitch. But the speaker at the time said the cases were still in court, which made sense anyway, because the courts were going to rule one way or the other concerning the glitch. But long after the court processes, that matter has never been listed. And so neither the House of Representatives nor the National Assembly has talked about it. But we have utilized forums to talk about it. And the APC has not felt any compulsion or shame to address the issue of that glitch. So it remains there in living memory.
Did the minority caucus across both chambers, did they raise this matter when INEC came for their budget defense?
Well, I do not belong to the Committee on Electoral Matters, that's INEC, so I wouldn't know if
couldn't they have also...
But I'm sure it would have been raised at one point or the other.
Yeah, but couldn't it have been, at least, if not consistently, time and again, raised on the floor of either Senate or the House by other party members?
No, you know that INEC on its own has whimsically explained the glitch to say, well, it was just an occurrence. But a real investigative hearing was bound to unearth certain things, because an investigative hearing will have the power and audacity to summon even individuals connected to that occurrence.
What is your concern about this amendment, the way it stands now?
Well, two concerns. Section 60, that we spoke about, that the Senate added a proviso. And don't forget, our problem with that, some people are saying that internet availability in some places. Mike Igini, former INEC resident electoral commissioner, is on record as having said that prior to 2023 elections, INEC and the Nigerian Communications Commission did conduct a survey and that showed that 97% of the electoral areas had 2 or 3G network coverage. Secondly, after the 2023 elections, who has ever complained that beavers didn't work in his or her area? Not one person. And I challenge anybody to still come out and tell Nigerians. So I feel a little bit of shame if able-bodied men would come out before the public to say there is no internet in my village. Then what are you doing to bring internet to your village? And nobody has ever complained that beavers didn't work in 2023. So going forward, 4 years down the line, we are still going back to that line. And these beavers, it's like our phone, like several people have explained. You send a message, there is no network, you enter a network coverage area, it delivers.
Yeah, which is part of what we told...
And shows the time that the message was even sent.
Because, I mean, it just clearly suggests that there's some sort of mischief here, because it's not really about so-called network.
I'm a politician. Let me tell you the lacuna they're creating.
Go ahead, please.
Now they can, you know that the whole process of ad hoc staff is controlled by INEC.
Yeah.
With some politicians playing active roles, giving them lists, and they accept this list. And because they are controlled by INEC, they can get some of these ad hoc staffers that are not pensionable or permanent staffers of INEC, not to upload on the excuse that there is no network coverage, and then revert to from EC8A. I hear the majority APC say that, well, you have your copy. How many copies can you tender in court? What is the time frame for the court to examine? We saw mutilations in 2023. Did the courts have enough time to sift through each one? When you are given maybe 2 days to present all your evidence. So I think that they are just setting the stage for a grand larceny of the electoral process.
Because even as at the time the first part was amended, where they put the lacuna, or the proviso, we were thinking, when we were asking them, look, if you're saying, yeah, where the network fails, you rely on from EC8A, who determines when the network even fails? What's the threshold? Because the thing was, as we've seen previous days, what they do is they just tell you there's no network in this area. And then they just do whatever they want. And so clearly this raises more concerns that this was the intendment of those lawmakers who didn't even want the electronic transmission of results in the first
place. Yeah.
You know, I refuse to give up hope. Because, yeah, so some people will say, look, from what we are seeing now, it does appear that, you know, all is been passed, it's been done, there's nothing we can do. Because on the face of it, if one were to just look at it face value, what the Senate was trying to pass, some people will say, come on, guys, we all know that this is our country, it's developing. There can still be network issues, etc., etc. And maybe what the Senate was trying to do was just make a provision, just in case. But our experience, unfortunately, tells us otherwise. We know that in the place where provisions are made, for instance, when in 2015, when there was the card reader, an incident form. The incident form in many places was far much more than the people whose card the card reader could read. And so the distrust that a lot of Nigerians have for this proviso stems from experience. They've seen something. But they also know that INEC has powers. INEC's, how do I put it now, the rules and regulations in terms of how the process should go is still very sacrosanct. I'm reading right now that INEC is saying that this weekend, the elections that are happening in the FCT, the results must be transmitted from the polling units. And I think that's what they're going to rely upon. Is there any way that pressure can be applied to INEC in terms of what its own rules are, what the rules and regulations are, to make sure that the places where this network is not available are minimal? That what is actually on the EC8A, I beg your pardon, is the same thing that it is on the Beavers machine, and that there should be no difference between what somebody eventually brings, because I want to imagine that in the process, yes, the thing did not go, but the picture was taken nonetheless. It does not stop anyone from taking a picture of what the results sheet says. So I want to imagine that there must still be a process where that picture can be taken, and that is what will eventually be relied upon should there be a dispute between what is on the EC8A and what is on the Beavers machine. Is that impossible to ask for? Is it too much to hope for?
No, my friend, and that is why we are having this discourse, because the power resides ultimately in the people. And when the people move, you recall that it took the protests at the National Assembly to even get the National Assembly to expedite and finalize work on this process. We all knew that the elections were coming. Now the INEC has regulations, but all we are seeking is for this to enter into the laws remember the Supreme Court kept the INEC regulations by the side because INEC talked about electronic transmission through the same beavers. But it wasn't accepted because it wasn't written into the law. And that's why we want that word electronically transmitted to be written in, which we have achieved. But it's like giving with one hand and taking with the other. So they still took away that foolproof mechanism by introducing the proviso of where it fails. And I've challenged anybody to prove that it failed in 2023.
All right, just hang on a moment. We've got, I mean, beyond the drama in the chambers, part of the bigger question is, what does this mean for the credibility of future general elections in this country? Does this amendment strengthen the system by aligning it with infrastructural realities, or does it reopen old fault lines of trust and transparency? Well, we're joined this morning by Professor Pat Utomi. He's a professor of political economy and is a founder the Center for Values in Leadership. Prof, good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today.
Morning, Chamberlain.
Well, what the honorable gentleman here has described, which transpired on the floor where he was on yesterday, just fits the description of the tyranny of the majority, as it were, on the floor of the House. And some interpreters are saying, look, they're simply telling the people, well, we've done what we want to do. It's up to you now. Do what you think you want. And people look to opposition. There's a big question now to see, well, there has to be a way to send a message. What are your thoughts about all of this as it's playing out now?
Well, this is simply a collapse of a sense of shame in the political class in Nigeria. I mean, any idiot can tell what game is being played. We know it's not about sensitivity to availability of network. If that were the case, as diligent legislators, they should have had laws that say that fintech cannot operate in Nigeria because it is possible that the network can fail and a decent, honest citizen will lose their money. But they didn't do that. So clearly there is a motive, and the motive is a motive of stealing, of cheating, of treason. Because to take what does not belong to you and usurp the governing of the country is treason. And so my personal recommendation is several. The Attorney General fails in his duty if he doesn't begin to prosecute those people in the Senate who are committing treason against the Nigerian people by refusing to do what is right. Two, the people are the ultimate authority. The people should begin to picket all members of the National Assembly who have not done the right thing in front of their homes, constituency offices, and begin a process of recalling all of them from National Assembly. And the people should be determined that nobody, I'm sorry there will be collateral damage of some good people who are there today, nobody in the current National Assembly should return to the next assembly because they have abused the fundamental reason for representation, which is the fact that it's an agency function. They don't act in their interest. They act in the interest of those who have sent them to represent them. And they have deliberately chosen not to represent those people's interests in order to advance a crooked intention to commit treason by preventing the will of the Nigerian people from being reflected in election outcomes. This is the simple truth of what is going on. And if they don't get tried in Nigerian courts, by golly, we will go to international courts and seek that they be tried. Look, I started this campaign even under military rule. When Abacha was in power and what was going on, I traveled around the world at my own expense, talking to leaders, talking to editorial boards, saying to them that countries with weak institutions are in such a position that we need supranational institutions to hold power accountable. An outcome of all of that was the International Criminal Court. When I was carrying out this campaign, of course, with others better healed, I wanted two courts. This current criminal court, which would deal with issues of genocide and co, and a second, an economic crimes court that would try leaders from countries with weak institutions that carry out economic crimes against their people. Most people told me that it would not happen, it will not work. Oh, people go back to the Peace of Westphalia, 1648, when these notions of sovereignty were established and you couldn't interfere in the internal affairs of countries. But we know, after the 30 Years' War, following the defenestration of Prague in 1618, that new conditions have still prevailed upon the conscience of the international community, which led to the United Nations looking at what happened to the Jews in Germany and the genocide at Armenia and such places, that a new world order needs to prevail. And we argue that an extension of that new world order is that politicians from poor countries like Nigeria, who are committing treason against the people, should be triable in international court. Even people in INEC, who have worked in INEC and have conspired to prevent the will of Nigerian people from holding, should be liable to trial in these international courts and should spend the rest of their lives in a place like Fiji, in a prison in Fiji. We, a people, institute the people's revolution that will make these things happen. Otherwise, Nigeria will continue to be a sad laughing stock before the world.
So shall we give up now, or do you think that there is still a room for us to navigate? And yes, sir.
Yeah. We should not give up. We should fight harder to make sure that the will of people prevail. Look, you remember the Philippines. Ferdinand Marcos thought he had everything. He had all the powers. He could do what he wanted to do. And small women with their candles and their rosary beads came out and sat there. And Marcos ordered the tank on these women. And the general who led the tank out, Fidel Ramos, turned the tanks around on the presidential palace. And that was the end of Marcos. The police and the military are being put on notice that the class in Nigeria is trying to prevent the Nigerian people from being true sovereigns. And they too have an obligation, like Fidel Ramos had.
Well, Prof, in addition to some of what you recommended, part of the challenge that we have equally noticed is the death of certain credible persons, you know, like a huge number, just get into the political arena in that complex whole and seek to make that change. Most of the times, many will tell you, nah, I can't find myself getting in there. How do we get to the next level to ensure that we have at least a group, if not way much more than that, to get into the frame and let that change also happen from that angle?
Well, you've got to start from educating the people. A number of things have been weaponized by the political class in Nigeria. They weaponize poverty so that a pauperized people have, look, a tonic metaphor is of a class of people that they are so deep in water, literally, that a ripple can drown them. And when you are drowning, you hang on to any straw. You are powerless. This is why in some of the great democracies of the world, everybody could not vote the same day. In the United States, they use property to evaluate maturity before you could get the vote. Went on for hundreds of years, literally. But we live in an enlightened age where people who are illiterate can catch up more quickly. So we must embark on massive public enlightenment and tell people of their rights so that they can claim it. Look, we also need to educate fellows who are not so smart but think they have power. We let them look at Sudan and tell them what our friends said to those who led Sudan, who thought they were infallible, until the revenge of the poor began. They have reduced their country to rubble. We look at Somalia, we look at Liberia, and let us say to these people who are putting themselves ahead of the Nigerian people that the hour is near, and they will pay a very dear price for what they are doing.
Well, part of what we also saw the last elections, it's a huge statement, is that there are actually a lot of people who really want this change to happen. And it also does appear as though there are perhaps a lot more people who equally want that change to happen, who perhaps didn't see the need to take that step, because how could we explain Labour Party in less than 6 months garnered that amount of votes, 6 million odd votes, almost the same with a candidate who's been contesting since 1992.
When you remove all the cheating, you will find that it was several times. But anyway, let's go with that.
But what principle do we apply now? Because you imagine that if some of those other people who thought, man, nothing will happen, if they had also come out there and done something, who knows? The result might have been different. How do we get them also to see reason why do something? Don't just sit on your hands or something.
By having the kind of conversation you and I are having right now, they may be motivated to see that the possibilities are there. So this movement that led to 2023 was natural. Anybody can tell you what they did or did not do. Even those of us in the so-called forefront, I have no clue what we did. We just essentially ran into a desire by the Nigerian people to get rid of this mess. And that was aborted. A company, let me go back to my business as a teacher of business. A company does not seek to get a return on experience, that does not seek to be a learning organization, does not stay around for a long time. And so to get a return on experience, what you do is whenever you have a misstep, you evaluate the mistake. How come we had the elections of 2023 and there has been no evaluation of what happened? Foreign broadcast organizations did clear analysis and proved that the result in River State were a complete pass, as it was not the vote of the people, was more than a reversal of just the vote of the people. Nobody has bothered to prove that. We must begin now. We must ask what happened in 2023. There must be consequences. If there is no consequence, then the mess will continue. It is a time for consequence management, which is the basis from which companies ensure that they remain effective. Countries should be in the same position. Lawyers, I believe, have a great part of the blame in this country. Lawyers, by their profession, should be responsible for doing everything to ensure that the rule of law prevails. But the judiciary has been sadly delegitimized in Nigeria. And everybody talks about it, including lawyers. And lawyers haven't done enough. I believe lawyers should begin a process of delisting judges and lawyers who have participated in this demolition of the foundations of Nigeria's democracy.
Prof, when I asked you about hope, I don't think I was speaking about Nigeria in general. I was speaking in relation to the process that has now happened and produced this new electoral amendment. It's still a bill. It hasn't been signed by the president. There are those who think that the president shouldn't sign it and should discard it, even though some people will say maybe that is us throwing the baby out to the bathwater. That is if you believe that there is any baby here. But I want to ask you, because it does appear that a lot of people are disappointed. They are totally unhappy, and they think that we have already made room for us to not have very good elections come 2027. Do you share that belief, and do you think that there is still something that can be done to remedy it?
I will go as far as to say cancel the whole elections if we don't get the proper thing done now. It is pointless because people will have no faith in the election. They will not come out to vote. And I believe that's what some of those people in the Senate want, for Nigerians not to come out to vote. But let them go and look at what happened to Samuel Doe. Things happen to people who think they can run roughshod over the will of the people. Things happen to them.
So what would you say to, you would say to Nigerian people to come out to vote in spite of the imperfections in the Electoral Act?
No. I'll say to Nigerian people to boycott the elections completely.
Is that wise? Because we saw what happened on the floor of the House yesterday.
Let them know that they've carried out a coup. And let them go to the international community and talk about their legitimacy.
As I said, I was asking if that was wise, because we saw what happened on the floor of the House yesterday. Opposition lawmakers were unhappy with what had transpired on the floor of the House and staged a walkout, and they just paved way for that amendment to pass, smoothly.
It's a cult. The APC people in the House who knew the truth, knew what to do, were ashamed, were afraid to be seen. Let the cult, the APC, prevent them from getting nominated. Why does everybody want to be in public office so badly? Why do they all want? Why is the dignity of standing for truth not enough to say, even if they get me, let them get me? I don't mind not coming back to this house. For that, they bear a burden for which they will pay a price, I assure you. Big price.
In fact, Prof, INEC is proposing 873.78 billion naira for this election we're even talking about that is going to happen. And the budget keeps increasing every now and then. So it appears we keep spending huge amounts of money and not getting the kind of result that people want.
For nothing. Yeah. You see, this is what I insist that this is internationalized. All of the INEC money donated by foreign donors, who should account to their own taxpayer. And what they do when people abuse taxpayers' money is that they try them in their countries. They should not, because they are in other countries, throw the money away. So the international community should demand an accounting from INEC. I am very particular about INEC. I would like to see anybody who has worked in INEC subjected to a review of their account, assets. And if they indicate that their assets bear no resemblance to their income, it should be put on trial. Because INEC is part of making this mess. You see, the consequence is so much more than even the so-called election outcome. Because they've ravaged our institutions. Central to human progress are a number of things. Most historians, economists, political scientists are now agreed that institutions are premium. I like to add culture. Values and institutions are central to how human progress takes place. In doing what these fellows are doing without thinking, they are fracturing the value system of Nigeria. They are destroying institutions like Nigeria, like INEC, Nigerian police, the military, and all of that. What it is that they're sentencing Nigeria, lack of progress, in perpetuity. If that can go through their heads and they come out with the swag they come out with, they need to be in an asylum.
Well, interesting point you made. Pat Utomi is a professor of political economy, founder, Center for Values in Leadership. We do appreciate your time this morning.
You're welcome.
Honorable, where is the opposition when we need them? Because tomorrow, who knows, if everybody is going to move to the ruling party now, further dashing the hopes of Nigerians, when we thought that at least we'll have some persons who will stand up and be counted, but it appears as though we'll still have some rivers to cross.
Well, everybody won't move to the opposition. We will never come to that day when we will have a one-party system in Nigeria. You know, Prof, okay, I think it was you who raised the issue of INEC and the funds.
Yeah.
I remember reading the late novelist from Choba, Port Harcourt, Captain Elechi Amadi. He wrote one novel, Sunset at Dawn. But what we appear to be confronted with is sunset at noon in broad daylight, like the one that happened yesterday. This issue of funds for INEC, as part of the proposals, the radical proposals that we pushed forward during the whole process of this consideration of this bill, not yesterday, long before now, was the suggestion by largely opposition lawmakers, supported by some APC persons in the House. In fact, that amendment came from the chairman, House Committee on Rules and Business, Right Honorable Ejirogene Waive. He had proposed that all elections be done in one day. All he needed to be done was 2 additional ballot papers, the governor and the state assembly papers added. And then we have...
It will save off this amount of money.
All this amount of money. If you save 400 and maybe 15 billion naira, it could go into a whole lot of things. And we are here talking about the electoral...
So why didn't they pass? What happened?
Yeah, of course, we are told that's not what the powers that be wanted. And so they took it out.
Oh dear.
But the real issue that Nigerians seem to gloss over is the issue of our economy. We are talking politics here and talking elections, but we are running a voodoo economy, and nobody is concerned. We have raised these alarms. Last year's budget had a borrowing component of 14.1 trillion naira. 14.1 trillion naira borrowing component. Now, the Nigerian Revenue Service has a revenue target of 25 trillion naira. They made 28, so we had 3...
Surpasses
yes, we have 3 billion standing out there. Now, the borrowing, the DMO, the Debt Management Office, stated that our domestic debts that we borrowed last year is in the region of 16 trillion.
Wow.
And remember that I stated that the borrowing component to beef up between our revenue, from what we have to finance the budget was 14.1 trillion. Now, if we had borrowed 16.1 trillion, the last of which the National Assembly approved, the House of Reps, I know it was November 13, 2015, 1.15 trillion naira, specifically to pay domestic contractors.
That wasn't done.
Those contractors have not been paid. Remember also that the president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, on September 2nd, 2025, told Nigerians and the world that we had surpassed our revenue expectations by August 2025. So if you have a budget of, say, 51 trillion, you made revenue. And remember, it's not only the revenue service that is income generating. There is customs and several others. If we've met this and we've borrowed to this tool, where are all this money going?
So someone needs to explain this discordant terms.
Professor talked about weaponization. We suspect that all of these funds are being kept and to be channeled for the 2027 election. Nigerians should ask questions.
I guess it rains. When it rains, it pours. Honorable Victor Afam Organized, leader of the Labour Party caucus and member representing Ogbari Federal Constituency of Anambra State in the 10th House of Representatives. Thank you for your time this morning.
My pleasure, always.
That wraps it up today on the program. We will see you tomorrow. Don't go away. We will be back tomorrow. But for now, that's it on Sunrise Daily. I'm Chamberlain, so goodbye.
Well, it's the start of the fasting season, Lent for Christians and Ramadan for Muslims. What would it mean for us? And what would it mean for our polity?
Maybe we'll be calm and peaceful.
That's the question, and whether we'll be truthful as well as transparent. Well, thank you so much for watching. I'm Maupe Ogun. You have a wonderful day.